Welcome. I'm your host, Dustin.
And I'm your co-host, Dean.
And today, we are joined by the spookiest fella out of Baltimore, Maryland, Chris LaMartina. Best known for his work on WNUF Halloween Special, What Happens Next Will Scare You, Dead Teenagers, and more. Let's jump into the Halloween spirit with Chris himself as we talk about his work. So, Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I like how you lean into a Dead Teenagers, the movie when I made when I was like 18 and 19.
Hey, I had to put something very, very old in there,
Oh,
we gotta let
dude.
people go watch that stuff too.
Oh yeah, they'll turn it off immediately.
Hey,
I'm gonna
at least
go
they
back
watched it.
I want to go back even further, man. Amerikill. You made something called Amerikill at the age of 14, man.
America was actually one of those
Wow.
movies that, like, man, we're gonna launch right into this immediately, right? So, like, a lot of people have rediscovered that because Tony Vasilio at SOV Horror re-released it. But like, America was my attempt when I was 14 years old to try to make like a feature-length slasher movie, and it ended up being like 55 minutes or so. But literally, like, I think that one for a 14-year-old holds up pretty well. Dead Teenagers, I'm still sort of like, oh god, like there's some things that are pretty cringy. But the 14-year-old side of me, of the Miracle days, I'm like, okay, all right, you were fresh out of 8th grade, killing kids in the sewers by your parents' house.
Hell yeah, man.
You're so creative at the age of 14. I think that's fantastic, man. It's so fantastic. What did you shoot that on? And like how did you edit it at the age?
So, oh man, the editing is fucking nuts. Okay, so I can cuss on here, right? Where this isn't
Yes,
like
yeah,
monitored by the
not
FCC.
censored at all.
All right, cool. All right, so America was shot on a format called God, it's just so funny. I thought I was gonna be talking about WNUF in the sequel. Instead, we're talking about my 14-year-old.
getting it, we'll get
Oh
it.
no, trust me, we'll make our rounds.
Okay, cool. So America was shot on a format that Sony had called, I think it was exclusively Sony, called Digital 8. So it shot on high 8 tapes, but quote unquote made it digital. So once they were shot on that camera, they became like, you could only watch them on Sony products. So it was proprietary. But the editing was crazy. So when I was 14, I didn't have access to computer editing. And I made a couple shorts where I did like the back and forth VCRs. But the problem was back then I didn't have the what was it? Oh god, I'm looking at my VCR for the term. What the eraser heads, the flying eraser heads, flying erasers, whatever they're called. And so every time you did a cut, it would be these weird rainbow lines, right? So I'd be like, fuck, that doesn't look professional. So what I ended up doing for a lot of my early films as a kid to make sure they'd look good, we did what you'd call in-camera editing, where you'd basically like okay, I'll film Dean in this angle and I'll go click. Okay, on the count of 3, you say your line at 3. 1, 2, 3. Ding. Dean says his line. Then I do the reverse angle and be like, all right, Dustin, you're gonna say your line on the count of 3. So all the editing, like there's no way I could have changed anything later on anyway, unless I sculpted it essentially, like I cut things out. But it was really fucking nuts because there's only 3 VCR edits in the whole movie. So it's kind of insane to think about a 55-minute movie made by 14-year-olds that only has 3 VCR edits. All the rest we were just very, very meticulously planning. And it's sort of, I always joke that it's like, when you don't know something's impossible, it's not impossible. And that's sort of how I approached that when I was a kid. But the toughest thing about making that movie was, I was 14. I didn't have a driver's license. Like literally, I was at the mercy of, will my friend's parents drive us to the location? Will my sister take us, up the street to Andrew's house? Like it was like stuff like that. It was just goofy.
That's great. I love that.
That's awesome. That's actually kind of leans into another question I had. Is like before you were doing that, what really sparked your love of filmmaking?
So I've always been a horror fan, like massively a horror fan, and I think that comes out of 2 things. So one, I'm the youngest of 3 kids. I'm, as my mom likes to call me, a nice surprise. I was an accident, but born 5 years after my older sister and then my older brother. So, my brother watched a lot of 80s horror stuff that I was too young to be watching, but being the shitty little brother, I would like run in and try to watch things like Monster Squad or Predator, and I just loved that stuff. I remember early on seeing like ads for like Night of the Demons being on TV or in theaters or whatever the hell it was, and being like holy shit, this is the most scary thing I've ever seen. So there's that part of it, that like horror was always sort of this illicit thing to me. And I remember my brother reading me the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books. And like
I still have those.
Dude, they're the best. And the illustrations and showing them to me, that haunted me for years. Still are some of the scariest things ever. But he would tell me those stories and he knew it scared me when I was little. So he would just try to scare the fuck out of me, and that's what happened. And then the other angle of it was I spent a lot of time growing up with my godmother, my dad's sister, who was a very superstitious Italian Catholic, and she it's funny, she would just tell me stuff about like stigmata and like the saints, like all these crazy stories about like these martyrs that like were so fucking scary to me. And then she would tell me like urban legends. Like she was one of the first people that had told me things like like the gang initiation of flashing your headlights, like that old urban
Oh
legend.
yeah,
Like she
yeah.
would tell me that like it was true. And she was a secretary at a Catholic school for a long time, and they used to do this thing where they would fax urban legends back and forth.
Yeah.
So like people would tell these things that like almost like the first sort of like email, like weird chain email type things, but it was fact. It was so bizarre. But she told me really crazy stories, and she used to she's very, very religious. We used to go to I mean, she still is very religious. She still watches all the priests' linens every weekend. She cleans the church on Sundays. Ironically though, she was the woman that bought me my first horror movies. She bought me a copy of Toxic Avenger when
Wow.
when I was 5 years old.
What a first movie to get too. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I should say first horror movie because
Yeah.
I thought it was gonna be like Toxic Crusaders, and man, I'll never forget, dude. We were watching that, and I like the first sex scene hit. And I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I was like, "Hey, Lulu," her name's Mary Lou. I called her Lulu. Hey, Lulu, I don't think I should be watching this. And she walks back in, and the sex scene was over, and she's like, "Oh, it's fine. That bad scene's over. You can keep watching it." Like I think she just wanted to be not bothered, and instead she like scarred me for life.
Wow. That's a really good movie, and it fucked me up too. And I watched it way later. I think I was maybe like 13 or 14, and yeah, the movie definitely brings you through the stages of like, what the hell is going on? Shouldn't be watching this, but I am anyway.
But it's crazy though, because that one made me I needed some like gestation time to realize what I was watching. But like when I was like 7 or so, I was like, okay, Lulu, will you buy me Toxic Avenger 2 now? And I remember we had to buy it special in order from I don't know if we were at I mean, there's probably a regional chain. It doesn't matter, but like some like big box store had to special order it for us, their video section. But that stuff, like the filmmaking part of it was, you watch enough horror movies, you want to start making movies, you want to start telling stories. But I would sit down when I was a kid. Like I loved Ghostbusters, the animated series, and the movies.
yeah.
I would sit down, and my godmother would sit at a straight up typewriter. This is before she had a computer, and I would say, "All right, sit down, Lulu. I'm going to tell you a scary story, and you're going to type it up." So I dictate these stories to her, and I mean, I've read one probably about 10 years ago. She found one and read it out. It's just a series of non sequiturs. Like it's just all these like it was a dark and stormy night. Like the hand came out of the grave. Like it makes no fucking sense. But like I had these sort of like this love of horror tropes because I loved anything spooky. I mean, like Halloween was like my favorite time when I was a kid.
Oh man, I can relate to all of that. Everything you just said. Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
My granddad used to tell me that there was it was a dark and stormy night, and he used to really relax me. That's what would get me to sleep.
Yeah.
He'd come in and he'd be like,
Totally.
"It was a dark and stormy night," and I was like, "Oh man, I feel so relaxed and chill right now."
100%. I mean, I love those stories she told me. She told me so many crazy stories that just stuck with me. Like she told me about like all these things I don't even hear about folklore wise. She told me about this thing one time. I need to get her to tell these stories before she can't tell them anymore. That sounds dark, but I'm just, reminding of us our own mortality. She told me about this story about this I don't know if I think it was Italian. It definitely was Italian because it's an Italian word, but a Shuganuli bowl, which is like two people hold this bowl and it sort of functions like a Ouija board where you ask it yes or no questions, and I guess the spirits of one of the saints will turn it left or right by your two fingers. What kind of questions you ask? I don't know how to spell it though. I've never looked it up, but I've always been curious about that. Now actually, you guys reminding me about this makes me want to look it up. I'm gonna write it down.
That's awesome. Wow. Dean, I'll let you throw a few questions before we start jumping everything. I know you had a couple you wanted
man.
to.
So when you sort of started getting more seriously into filmmaking, what like other filmmakers really inspired you? What sort of other work was you watching, and other filmmakers were you sort of following to sort of kind of, I don't know, sort of own your craft, and when you getting into it a bit more.
So early on, I think the biggest influences were, I mean, I do think Trauma was immensely influential. And I think as I grew older, I don't think that was as like, and I also think Trauma changed, right? Like, I think like when I was like preteen, like stuff like Toxic Avenger and Romeo and Juliet, I really loved. Some of the stuff like Terra Firma and like later on, and like that like some of the Toxic Avenger sequels were too silly for me. But early on, I liked that idea of being sort of like this sort of like punk rock mentality, really influenced a lot of the stuff I did. But then horror wise, one of the biggest influences early on early on was Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead movies. I mean, I
Oh
remember
yeah.
the first time I saw Evil Dead was so Rob Zombie hosted a week of zombie movies on Sci-Fi Channel. Like he showed like Carnival of Souls, Night of the Creeps, Evil Dead, I think Night of the Living Dead. And it was funny because he showed a very heavily edited for TV version of Evil Dead. Wow. And I just remember thinking at that time, like every horror movie that I'd seen had been fairly big budgeted, right? Like probably like somewhere in the millions to make these movies. Like even so, like like Monster Squad and Predator, while they're still like wild movies, they're Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
So when I saw Evil Dead for the first time, I was like, holy shit, this movie looks like just like cheap. Like this looks dirty and cheap and like low budget, but I didn't know what low budget was then. But at the same time too, watching that, like it created something in me that I was like, oh my God, I could do this. Yeah. Like I could, like, I mean, I don't know how old I was when I saw it, like nine-year-old kid being like, oh my God, I could, make something like Evil Dead is insane. But like, it really did excite me like that. And I think that was the same sort of equivalent to like when I like first started hearing punk rock bands or like local music. I was like, oh shit, all you got to do is learn like a power chord and then you can write songs. Yeah. And that's what Evil Dead was for me, just because I didn't know, really what it meant to make a micro budget movie or a low budget movie or any of that stuff.
That's very cool, man.
Awesome. And
was that Greg Nicotero did a lot of the effects for that, wasn't it? Was that?
I think for Evil Dead 2.
The second one's.
He did 2, didn't he? Yeah, cool. Yeah, I was trying to think of the effects on that. Yeah, 2.
Yeah, that was. I was gonna say that's probably pretty early in. Was it K&B then? Right? Yeah. So.
I believe so. Yeah.
But I mean, it's funny. It's part of the stuff that ties into the sequel that I've been talking about. The WNF sequel is when I got obsessed with Sam Raimi, and I ended up getting this mail order tape trading catalog back when I was a kid, and I was about like 9 or 10 years old, and they had a listing for Sam Raimi's short films, like all the stuff he made before he made Evil Dead. And I remember like being like, well, I've got to fucking see this. I've got to see what Sam Raimi was doing when he was my age or a teenager. And I remember getting this tape from this bootleg tape trading catalog. And my God, dude, it looked like total ass. Like you could not tell most of what was on the tape because it was probably like a 7th generation dub or something of these short films. Yeah. It was truly remarkable to watch some of Sam Raimi's early stuff because he made a bunch of weird short films that really did show up things later on, like in the Evil Dead movies. He made this whole short about like a hamburger helper hand. Yeah. That's very much like influenced what happens in Evil Dead 2. So.
Yeah. A lot of his college.
Man, I need to see this myself now. I need to try and find that somewhere.
I'm sure they're on YouTube. Yeah, they're probably better quality because I mean, I remember watching that. Like, I remember, okay, you buy a tape from something mail order when you're a kid, and it feels like it takes like 12 years to get to you, right? Yeah. It was probably like 3 weeks, but in kid time, it was just awful. Mm-hmm. And I remember popping the tape in and being so excited and being like, I cannot see. I'm squinting my eyes right now for everyone listening. I cannot see a single, like it looks like I'm watching this tape with my eyes wrapped in cellophane. Like it was like,
yeah, it's like they rubbed some Vaseline on this on the lens, and you're like, what the hell is this? Oh man, I kind of miss old bootlegs like that because I don't know, it's kind of a charm with them, seeing really messed up films and then watching it how they really are. It's like you kind of want to watch it the really crappy way. I don't know, that's just me. I'm just like, I love that. And that's,
I think,
Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I talk too much.
I love it.
But I was gonna say, I think for me, what you just said makes a lot of sense because there are certain movies that when you clean them up or give them like a really nice HD transfer or 4K transfer, you can start seeing makeup seams or you can start seeing things that like are bad. And one of the things, like, don't get me wrong, not every movie should be watched that way, but there's certain sleazy movies where you're like, oh, you're actually forgiving a lot of the budgetary constraints through the way it was degenerated by bouncing through VCRs or on the tape. So I 100% agree with that. I mean, there's certain movies, especially some of the old like shot on video stuff is cool to watch like that, or a lot of like the like old Italian cannibal movies. That was how I watched most of those when I was a kid. But yeah.
And that's actually something that I do. I usually try to get like the highest resolution I can for certain movies and see if it holds up. That's a game for me. It's just like I remember watching as a kid, and then there'll be movies where I'm just like, yeah, that effect looks really bad in 4K or really bad in Blu-ray. So I don't know. It's a fun little game, and I usually just kind of go back and watch them original way when I was like a kid. And it's kind of go right into us asking you some questions about the WNUF Halloween special, because this is kind of along the same lines of like it's not crappy, so to speak, but it's like you're watching it through an old VCR.
Yeah.
So what was the process of you getting all the shots to look like that?
So, well, some of the stuff is archival, right? But I was gonna say but some of the stuff that we not some of the stuff, most of the stuff that we shot was it was shot on tape stock for the original. So like, one of the things I'll say is it was shot on a combination of SVHS, VHS, and then also DV cam, which is tape stock, but it is digital tape stock.
Yeah.
And that was actually shot on like an ENG, so electronic news gathering camera, so a big shoulder TV camera.
Damn.
So that was shot like that. And I mean, but also here's the thing though, like the VCR degeneration. So the movie was duped back and forth about 3-ish times. So I put it on DVD because obviously I had to make it into a format that could go to VCR, and then I went back and forth on the VCR, the VHS a couple times. So I did that, and that basically makes most things look like video. But the big thing with video is that some people don't realize is also like the frame rate. So video is 30 frames a second, film is close to 24. So that's a major part of it. That's why everything sort of looks like a soap opera on purpose with video, or with purpose of what we were trying to do. But no, I mean, a lot of things I've seen recently where, and I don't fault these people because it's not that important to them, but like a lot of folks just want to put a filter on it, right? And there's been some great revolutionary like software to make things look like VHS, but honestly, nothing looks like VHS like bouncing tapes between VCRs.
Like doing it,
and that's what was important to me. Yeah.
Okay, cool. It had such a nostalgic vibe, man. Because I mean, I'm 43 years old, so I remember recording stuff on VHS and bouncing stuff around on VHS, and I was like, wow, this is like being a kid again. This is what I used to watch when I was a kid.
You know, it's really funny you bring up the kid angle to it, because when I was doing the sequel, I spent like probably about 3 weeks or so doing all the damage and figuring out like certain transitions and things and I spent a lot of time literally like being like a weird fucked up DJ where I would just jam tapes and fuck things up and try to do all kinds of weird things. And in order to do that, I actually went through a lot of my old short films from when I was like 12 to 16, and I was going through these VHS tapes and watching all those old tapes, like looking at things that I forgot I filmed, but like all those old like this flood of nostalgia watching these old short films that I'd done was crazy, because you think about your past as a kid, almost like people might think about their home movies from the 50s or 60s if they're older, like how they almost all their memories feel like Super 8. All my memories felt like VHS, and it was weird. I mean, honestly, it was crazy. It was really weird. It was first time I'd heard my grandfather's voice in probably 25 years. Watching that tape, it was crazy. Yeah.
Wow. That's so cool that you have all that, though. You've got all that.
I'm very fortunate, man. Yeah. It was funny though, watching them. I'm like, why the fuck did I film this? Like, it's us screwing around at school. But back then, it's like, oh hey.
Yeah. It's great now. You've got it to look back upon, and it is literally, you've been keeping sort of video diary memories and short films. Since that age, and you've got all of that now. And I'm thinking, shit, man. I wish I had done that.
Yeah, we got stuff like that too. We have a lot of old home videos and stuff that I think we're starting to finally trans over to digital. That way things won't get lost. But it's always really cool going back and looking at things that you've done as a kid and you're like, wow, I don't remember that. Or like looking at like old Christmas videos. Those are always like some of my favorites, is like watching that. It's, I don't know, there's just like something very special about that. So those are fun to get into digital. I can't wait to get them all emailed to me from my mom. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
I've got a lot of old music. So I've been playing in a band. I literally been playing music in a band since the age of about 12, 13. We used to play at school. So I've got a load of old VHS of our band at like the school concert. Oh man. We did like Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith.
Hell yeah, man.
That's awesome.
It sounds so awesome. Funny. And I'm wearing this kind of weird Angus Young, like these shorts. And
I love that.
God knows what I was going for, man.
I need to see those.
No, you don't need to see those.
Yes, I do. Come on, man. We'll put them out on the podcast as a special episode. This was Dean when he was younger.
Maybe I'll send some over to Chris for.
Hell yeah.
Splice into a movie. Yeah.
Put that in some other movies.
Go. Talking about the casting for WNUF, did you kind of write any of the parts for like specific actors? Did you have anyone in mind? So you know
Yeah.
character and you thought, well, this actor would be perfect for that role, or
Yeah, so the for WNF it was interesting. I had the lead, Paul Fahrenkampf, who plays Frank Stewart. Like I wrote that movie with him in mind, and I remember when he auditioned. We still made him audition because you never know. You might write something for somebody, and they might just not be it. But I knew Paul from we had made a movie with him called President's Day, and he was in another movie we made called Witch's Brew. And I knew his sort of sense of humor felt very Frank Stewart-esque. And I also knew Paul was sort of like an old, kind of like an old hippie, and that's why Frank Stewart sort of says things like far out, like things that are clearly like in my head, Frank Stewart was always a radio DJ that transitioned to TV. And that's like I think we even end up using the liner notes in the WNUF spoken word record that Terrorvision put out a couple years back. But yeah, so basically for Paul, he came in, he did a terrible audition. And I literally did like pull him aside. I was like, Paul, I fucking wrote this for you, man. Like this character is you to me, right?
Yeah.
So he like I said like just do this, just like and the audition process was really interesting for WNF because we had them even though there were sides, like we actually had them improv. I asked Paul what was like was your favorite news story to report as and he had to answer as in character as Frank Stewart. I think he responded about judging like a local like swimsuit competition or something. So it was pretty funny. Like I mean like and then Brian St. August, who plays Louis Berger, there were a couple people up for that, but I thought Brian really nailed it. And I think when I put him and Helen Mary Ball, who plays Claire Berger, together, they just had real. Great. The Bergers like they have great chemistry together, and it's interesting. Like I felt like they just have this sort of like. And that's always like a thing of like trying to find conflict between characters in just what makes a scene naturally tense. They're very slow, very like calmly talking, and Frank is always aggressive. So in every scene they're together, it always sort of feels like they're just like at each other's throats, even if they're not, or even if it's a little bit more under the subtext. But yeah. But I was gonna say everything else in the movie. I mean, everything else was pretty much people audition. I mean, Paul. It was written for Paul, the original. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And this is another thing I really like too about watching What Happens Next Will Scare You, is seeing all the things that you kind of put into it, like the burgers are in that. So you get a little bit of a cameo from them, and you get a taste of like what the WNUF was, but you also get something new. So I wanted to ask you about the process of doing What Happens Next Will Scare You. Was it harder or easier to do that compared to WNUF, or were they both just two completely different challenges that you kind of can't put them on a spectrum?
So I think what's really interesting is most people know my filmmaking through WNUF, right? And I think by design, WNUF is very accessible because the cheapness, like the low budget, is part of the aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna build up to answer your question, so just bear with me.
Sure.
But yeah, so like basically like so WNF was shot for super cheap. Like it was shot on a really low quality format because that was the atmosphere, that was the vibe we were creating. A couple months after we made WNF, we were making Call Girl of Cthulhu, which was like a $41,000 movie, which doesn't sound like a lot to most listeners, but like for us, that was the biggest budget we'd ever had to make a movie. And if you look at Call Girl of Cthulhu, which I think it's streaming on Tubi for free right now.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So people can watch it, or if they want to buy a copy, you can go to our big cartel site. But like, I should really be saying buy a copy from us, not to go on Tubi, but whatever. But that movie was like a massive budget. However, but to us, I should say massive budget. But basically, like a lot of folks would call that cheap because it's not part of the aesthetic, right? So I say that as we had made WNUF, and WNUF was had been a bigger success than I ever realized, right? Like I remember telling my co-producer Jimmy, like he early on I was like, dude, no one's gonna fucking like WNUF. Like everyone's gonna think it's like just a waste of fucking time. It's an 82-minute movie with 25 minutes of commercial. But I want to make this movie, and this is what I want to do with it. So no one's gonna like this, but we're gonna make it anyway. And I was wrong in the sense that like people liked it a lot, but I also know I made that movie because I was driven by such an intense passion to do it. So that being said, it somehow became this like amazing success for us. Not financially successful, because none of these movies, I'm not a full-time filmmaker. I just do movies because I love them. But what ended up happening was we were hit up after the success of WNUF by a couple little people who wanted to give us money, right? Who said like, hey, like we'd love to see what you guys could do with like 80 grand. And we had just made Call Girl for 41. Now the problem with Call Girl at 41,000 is that nobody got paid. And then when you make a movie for 80 grand where somebody's paying for it, or 100 grand for someone's paying for it, you have to pay people because that's a real budget, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think when we made those movies back then, it's like we wanted every dollar to show up on the screen. Like I never took a paycheck. No one ever took a paycheck. Occasionally we would pay our effects team, or occasionally we pay folks who got naked, right? But it was like really just like, I'm really sorry, I can only pay you this much, but they would do that. We did as best we could. So when those people came to us with that money, they sort of like, and it happened, like 2 or 3 people sort of talked us about this. And ultimately what ended up kept happening was we crunched the numbers and be like, all right, man, like this doesn't make a lot of sense to take a year of our lives to quit my job that pays me a lot more to make what essentially my director fee would have been like 10 grand for a year of my life, which is fucking terrible money, right? And this is all leading to What Happens Next Will Scare You. So during that time period, we basically written a couple we basically pitched like 40 ideas for, like, they wanted to make, like, the one company that stands out to me was they want to make ghost movies and slasher movies. And I pitched them 20 ghost movies, then we pitched them 20 slasher movies. And basically, like, we wouldn't make any of these 7. And most of those ideas we came up with were sort of like really like some of them were cool and some of them turned into other things. But ultimately I was not really passionate. Like I was passionate about Call Girl of Cthulhu, or like I was passionate about WNF. And there was sort of this moment thematically in my life where I was like, well, what the fuck am I doing? Like, am I making movies because like I have to? Like, they don't pay my mortgage. Like they're not like covering my health insurance. And I had this sort of moment: do we just make movie after movie to stay relevant? Like, are we just sort of doing the the cinematic equivalent of jazz hands? And but it sort of felt like that because a lot, the world we live in right now, social media is, you need constant validation, and you need to kind of like be like, hey, like like, look at me, I'm doing this new thing, I'm doing this new thing.
I know that all too well.
Yeah, but it's like, but like essentially, like with a podcast, right? You're selling a product fucking constantly. You have to get more eyeballs and more eyeballs and more eyeballs. So the story of What Happens Next Will Scare You. And if folks are listening to this, they're wanting to WNUF, What Happens Next Will Scare You is a clickbait horror satire. Basically, it's about these folks. Good. Thank you so much.
So good.
It's these guys are basically like a BuzzFeed style office, and they're voting on the top 13 scariest viral videos. So it's an anthology film where every time they talk about one of these viral videos, you go into the world, and it's basically a found footage anthology with a lot of the stuff being sort of VHS driven, and then some like bloggers and like influencers, shit like that. But very much about clickbait. That movie thematically was about, are we putting meaningful things into the world, or are we just making bullshit? And that's what the movie was about, and basically how that shit will eventually consume you, and not in a good way, right? Like, it estranges you from from the people that really matter to you, like your family, and like, but like, yeah. So anyway, what ended up happening with WNF being a success was like all the business deals that were presented to us did not make sense for my life, right? At that time in my life, and this played into a lot of the character stuff with What Happens Next Will Scare You as well. I had become a creative director at an ad agency in Baltimore, and basically my professional life, I'm either creative director or doing a lot of like marketing, advertising type stuff for different corporations and things like that. So basically, I wanted to make another movie, and that was what I kept thinking about, this need for constant validation, and the idea of like getting eyeballs, right? As a creator, I should say, constant validation as a creator. And I knew I didn't want to do another crowdsource campaign like we did with Call Girl, because it's like, dude, we just fucking did that. Like, I don't want to keep asking people for money all the time, even though I know that's the only way I can keep making these movies. And I didn't want to get investors. Like, it's always a gamble, because none of these movies, even WNUF, has never made enough money to really pay back investors. I'm sure if someone like a producer is listening to this is like, well, then you're making shitty decisions. And I'm like, you're right, I'm not a businessman. But what I'll say is, we made What Happens Next Will Scare You for about $6,000, which is cheap, right? Yeah, and I'd have to double check the numbers, but like, about that. And but we did that by design, because we shot all the found footage anthology segments first, because we knew those would be like no money to make. And then what we ended up doing was we used all the gear from the agency I was working at. So I was the creative director for a live action video team at this agency in Baltimore. So I used all the gear for free. And basically what ended up happening was the crew that was my crew for all that stuff was all the folks I would hire for corporate gigs. And it was, what was really interesting about that, and what's really changed a lot of the my feelings about making movies and how difficult it is more so now than it was when I was in my mid 20s or late 20s. Folks got older. Like our core crew of people started getting older, and it was people had kids, people had mortgages, like people couldn't give us 15-hour days or couldn't take off a month of work to make a movie like we did with Call Girl. All the interns or PAs we had on Call Girl were now like working professionals, and I felt awful asking them to work for free, even though it's not like I was making buku bucks or any money really on that. So that being said, what happens next was harder than WNUF in a different way, right? I would work an 8-hour day. We shot it in our office, and then I would go get dinner, and we'd come back and shoot at that office from 6 p.m. till 11 o'clock, right? And then I'd wake up the next morning, I'd go back to work. So we did that for like two weeks when we shot the wraparounds. Shooting the found footage anthology segments, What Happens Next Will Scare You. That wasn't as taxing because we sort of did like weekend shoots, like Weekend Warrior style. So that wasn't bad. But it was a different movie. And what I will say this, now in regard to that, I don't really know if I'm ever going to make a feature like Call Girl where I take off, a month of work to make. I mean, I can't do that now. My job would probably not let me do that. But that's I would say comparing that one to that one is lifestyle changed big time. But I also want to clarify this too. There might be a lot of filmmakers listening that are like, oh, I guess I can't do it. It's like, no, that's not true. You pick projects and you figure out projects you can make that you're excited and passionate about that work in your life. Like I tell my film students, I used to teach, I haven't taught it for a while, but for like about 5-6 years, I taught screenwriting. And I used to tell them, dude, you have to have something that lines your wallet so you can pay your bills. You have to have something that lines your heart. I like to quote my buddy Mike Lombardo, director of I'm Dreaming of a White Doomsday. He always says, you got to find the thing that keeps the gun out of your mouth, right? And like it's true. I mean, like as a creative, I know personally, if I'm not busy, I get really fucking depressed, and like I need to find an outlet to consume my energy and my thought process, so I don't think about the worst things in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about doing the show, especially with Dean too. And we were actually before this, Dean and I were talking about, how right now we're both kind of going through this like really bad anxiety. Mainly, it's maybe because of a job or just how the world is or whatever it may be. But when we're here and we're doing this and we're talking to people as cool as you, Chris, and talking about films and shit that we love, like it just get away from all that shit.
You forget about all the shit, man. You're in the zone then, aren't you?
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, I think that's also the interesting thing for me. It's like, I mean, I could talk about the horror movie stuff, but just making movies and connecting with folks. Like my favorite times making movies is like, sharing a cigarette in between like setups, or like, literally just like eating stuff at the craft service table. Like it really rules just to have those moments where you're like, man, this is my tribe, and just connecting to other folks, especially fans or people that have mutual interests. Like, it's a good reminder that we're not the only weirdos,
Yeah, exactly. I want to take us back to WNUF. Dean and I were also talking about this. And was Ghostwatch an influence at all?
We always get this question, man. No, so I had never seen Ghostwatch until people started telling me about it, right? So I will say, I don't know if Jimmy was aware of it or not, or at what time. I mean, I don't think he would have wrote the movie if he thought we were straight up ripping off this thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What I'll say is I've also never. It's actually funny. I'm about to be on a podcast with the director Leslie, I believe is the director's name. Where I'm actually about to do a podcast with some that person and I think Sunday, believe it or not.
Oh wow.
So I feel like I should watch that whole. I've never seen the whole movie. So I need to watch the whole movie. I watched about like 20 minutes into it, and it was interesting. I mean, I think the fact that they pulled it off is amazing to me. But I wasn't feeling when I watched it, right? So I feel bad about that. But this is what I'll say. Ghostwatch, I think, is an amazing concept, and what I can tell you is I did not know that existed. I mean, if people don't believe me, that's fine. But it was a BBC thing, right? So it wasn't even commercially available in the United States until it was on Shudder, right? So like, how would I have
Is it
seen
on
that?
Shudder?
Yeah, it's on Shudder, I think now.
Yeah,
Believe,
that's
isn't it?
Oh,
the
in the
because it
States,
got
yeah.
like
You guys get different Shudder to us over here, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
and it's
Yeah.
also on. I think you can buy it DVD. I think they restored it and everything. Is what I heard like about a month back. I think like you can
I
actually
believe
go
it
like
when you
get a
said.
special edition. But
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They do. I saw that come across because my buddy Jed was posting about that. Yeah.
Dean
I
actually
couldn't
has
believe.
a
I
pretty
couldn't
good
believe that you
story.
guys have heard. I couldn't believe you guys had heard of it over in the States. When I mentioned it to Dustin earlier on, I was like, I mentioned Ghostwatch. I was like, do you think it might have been inspired by that? Have you guys heard of Ghostwatch? He's like, fuck yeah, man. Ghostwatch is huge over here. I was like, really?
Yeah, it
That's
is.
so funny. Well, I was gonna
Crazy.
say that's actually I feel like that's come up. I mean, that's the thing that's funny, man. I think WF had encouraged a lot of people to talk about Ghostwatch here, right?
Yeah.
Almost like how like remember when Blair Witch came out in the United States and like everybody was like, well, no, it's just like Cannibal Holocaust. No one, most horror fans, unless they were like hardcore, I shouldn't say no one, but like a lot of people didn't even know about Cannibal Holocaust until they were like, oh, it's like the proto Blair Witch, right? What I'll say if we're talking about influences of WF, there's a couple things here. So and I'd love to talk about Ghostwatch from a standpoint of comparison of tone, right? Because I think when we made it and the nostalgia angle and the advertising angle to what we do make them wholly different movies, especially like we made a comedy. I don't, as far as I know, Ghostwatch is not a comedy. But what I'll say is influences from WF is there's two things here. So years and years ago, I had heard about a live seance that was on a radio station in Baltimore. So this crew had went to the Edgar Allan Poe house, which Edgar Allan Poe had lived in Baltimore and passed away in Baltimore, and they went to the Edgar Allan Poe house and they brought in a psychic and they did a radio broadcast. And nothing crazy happened on the air. I've been trying to find a fucking copy of the recording for like 15 years now. I got read, shortly before we made WF. Never been able to find it. But that was an influence. But then the idea of, and plenty of movies have done, let's do a broadcast from a haunted house, right? Like one of the Halloween sequels does that. There's an old issue of it's either Vault of Horror or Tales from the Crypt, where the guy does a TV broadcast from there. And then there's this great one. Oh my God. It's a radio show, I think from the 40s, where it's like the conceit is he's recording a radio story from Frankenstein's castle, and then Frankenstein's monster shows up.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that one.
Yeah, but it's like so like stuff like that is the impetus for what WNF is doing. But ultimately, what I wanted to do with WNF was the fake commercials, right? Like I was an advertising guy, and I loved that shit. And like basically, I had this avenue to make all the dumb fucking commercials no one would ever let me do, right? And also also making it a love letter to Halloween was really important to me because I think talking about nostalgia, making a period piece. I think comparing it to Ghostwatch. Now I feel like I really need to watch it. Shit. Comparing it to Ghostwatch is, I mean, they were trying to scare people. You know, like I would not say WNF is a scary movie, and I don't think. I mean, people might be scared by it, but I did not say like most of my movies, even though they have some scares, they're comedies.
Yeah.
You know, I always joke WNF is like if Christopher Guest made a found footage movie.
Yeah. Ghostwatch came out because I remember I actually watched it when it was broadcast on the telly, and I think I was about 12 years old, and I was saying this to Dustin earlier on. I was so shocked that people in the States had even heard of it. And I remember going to a Halloween party with my parents. I was only about 12 years old, and they televised this Ghostwatch. And because back then, I think it was like 92. There was no internet, there was no phone, there was nothing like that. So it was actually kind of quite, it scared the absolute shit out of me, man. I remember coming back home and I had to turn all the lights on, and it was terrifying. But I think now for like this generation or people finding it now, it's just like, what is this shit? Or like, what is it? Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't know. It wouldn't have the same impact as like what it did when it very first came out. But
yeah. But it would also be really hard to make that now because I mean, like if you put Ghostwatch in modern context, people would probably be live tweeting it, right?
Yeah, for
so
sure.
Whereas like there was, and that was one of the things with the WNF sequel, setting it in the 1990s for the sequel was like we only have so many more eras before that collective consciousness of all us watching the same shows even exists, right? We all might watch Stranger Things, but we're not watching it at Thursday night at 8 p.m. So like that's the thing that's kind of interesting, and the internet totally changed that because it all becomes this like really weird experience of like immediacy, right? Although different schedules. So from the standpoint of consuming media. So, but I'll say what's interesting about Ghostwatch to me is I think it's so cool how they got the BBC to play along. I also think there's something potentially very dangerous about that, right? Like what they're doing essentially is War of the Worlds, right? Like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, you
That's a
know,
good comparison.
People over here thought it was real. People over here actually thought it was real. They thought it was actually being televised live, and it was real, and people were losing their shit.
Well, and wasn't there there's like a call-in number, I think, like some I always heard the story
like
that somebody killed themselves because they were like freaked
it
out or something.
It was based on the same. It was, but something like that. It was, but I know it was based on the same story as the Enfield Poltergeist, which was
which is the Warrens, isn't it? Like didn't they investigate that?
The Conjuring too. Which incidentally, the actual house is like half an hour away from where I live.
Oh, really? Nice.
It's in the biggest shithole area ever, man. It's like drive-by shootings and everything there now, you know. And it's just one sign in the window of the house that says like "Jesus saves" or something like that. And that's the thing. Sorry, Chris, come in.
And you're good. That's one of the things that I mean, like, I think what Ghostwatch did was so cool, from a standpoint of like that, like, man, what a hell of an illusion, right? But I guess the question about that and like comparing it to War of the Worlds is like, you know, at what point? That's one of the reasons why I've always interjected the humor in the WNF movies, right? Like, you know, you're looking at it through the lens of the past with the WNF stuff. Like, which is the you know, there's jokes about like the World Trade Center or like, you know, like stopping climate change in the sequel, because over the course of 30 years later, those are a lot fucking funnier with the epilogue of the last 30 years, right? But and I shouldn't say funny in quotation marks, but you know,
we know what you
mean. I should say, haha, 9/11. That's not what I was saying.
Canceled.
But exactly right. I just lost my job. No, but like what I was gonna say was I will say that like I've always wanted to make horror movies that are fun, and I think like the War of the World situation. I mean, there were people that were like seriously freaking out for their lives when Orson Welles did that, and he was in deep shit. And I think that's the question we have to ask. I mean, like ultimately the WNF2, there's a lot of how I've said this a couple times now. If WNF1 was about how we consumed media in the 1980s, the WNF sequel is about how the media started to consume us in the 1990s. And I think there's a very predatory angle to how some media outlets can do things to get reactions out of people that are potentially dangerous. You know, the same as a religion or a cult might, you know, hurt someone mentally. The media does the same exact things.
Yeah, for sure.
Not to take it down a dark road.
No, that's good. I love hearing how people, you know, talk about things in the world and how they think of it. So I love hearing you talk about all these really cool things and talk about your filmmaking and things that inspired you. It's really cool, and it makes me happy to be able to talk to people like you and have other people listen to things you have to say so they can go and watch your shit.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, big time.
Yeah,
big time.
And this is another thing is I know that, you know, the sequel's out. So where can people buy it?
Yeah, so the sequel, we are selling it directly. So the site is wnuf.bigcartel.com. And what I'll say is, so you can buy it directly. Actually, you can only buy it directly from us. I think like there's a handful of copies that are at some brick and mortar stores, but not many. Like I think TerrorVision down in Savannah might have some, and then there's this video store up in York, Pennsylvania that has a handful of copies. The American Daydream. like either if anyone's going to drive to those two locations, but if you're close to there, you might. But no, wnuf.bigcartel.com. So it's available on DVD. So the movie is actually called The Out There Halloween Megatape. Like I mentioned previously, it takes place in the 1990s. It takes place in 1994 and then jumps forward a little bit into 1996. The whole shtick this time, without going into the plot, because I'd like people to go in blind as much as possible. But what I'll say is the shtick this time is going back to that almost like that mail order catalog I mentioned earlier. The whole point is you're getting this movie from a mail order tape trading catalog. So Trader Tony's Tape Dungeon is the name of this place, and they're selling you a copy of the Out There Halloween Megatape, which is basically an old talk show from 1994 and a special event presentation from 1996, sort of stitched up together to be one quote unquote big tape.
Awesome.
But all that stuff, like you know. All that stuff, we made the movie over 5 years, and there's a lot of crazy story extensions, a lot of returning characters, and I mean, we even did the whole thing where at the VHS level of our crowdsource campaign, as well as on our site, you can get the VHS with a DVD and you get a full, I think it's like 16 pages. It's 350 fake movies that you could buy from Trader Tony's Tape Dungeon.
Oh, hell
So like
yeah.
all these fake like kung fu, sci-fi, triple X, like crazy shit. But yeah.
That's great, man.
That's really, really cool.
That was my COVID project. That was like when we were during lockdown back in March and April 2020. I was like, what the fuck am I gonna do? I can't make much of this movie right now. So I wrote like Melissa, my wife, who plays the lead in WNF2, and was my co-producer on the sequel. We would just sort of drink wine and come up with fake movie titles. Then I would spend the next day like writing blurbs about what those movies would be, and it was a really good time.
That's awesome. That's a really good way to market it too. That's really, really cool.
It's just about making things special, man. I mean, like that's the thing too. Like I've been resisting the urge for as long as possible to even put the sequel on a streaming platform because I want to have all that extra shit with the with the movie, right? Like when you watch a movie on streaming, you just get the movie.
Yeah, you want all the physical stuff that you can have and collect and whatnot. That's what I love
and the bonus features, like. So like the other thing too is if you guys are podcast guys, you might listen to like Last Podcast on the Left by chance. Or okay. So the audio commentary, there's an audio commentary from Trader Tony, and it's Henry Zabrowski from Last Podcast doing the Trader Tony commentary.
Wow. That's cool.
So like it's like shit like that is like really important for me as the whole package, and that's what we did. So yeah, I'm rambling though. I'm sorry.
No, I love it.
I love that sort of stuff. As a purist and as a fanboy of horror, I would love to have that. I'm such a purist. So I love having physical copies and
totally
all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would buy that in a heartbeat, man.
Yep. And this kind of leads into Salem Horror Fest as well, since I saw What Happens Next Will Scare You last year in Salem Horror Fest. And I know that this month actually, you're going to be kind of opening up the new service that they have, the Video Coven. How was that?
Yeah. So I reached out to Kay because we had played Salem Horror Fest with What Happens Next Will Scare You, and I think Salem Horror Fest this year is moving to April. I believe,
April next year. Yep.
But Kay's doing this Video Coven, which basically is like, I don't know if they're weekly screenings or monthly screenings.
All the shorts I got.
Oh man, that's awesome! Holy shit!
Yeah. Hell yeah!
Dustin was just holding up DVDs. That's it for the people who can't see.
All the shorts.
But no, I reached out to Kay because I was like, hey, we're gonna do a couple like East Coast dates of sequel screenings because we're basically doing like we're doing like Philly, Brooklyn.
Yeah, I saw you guys tweeting about that. I was like, oh my god, I wish I could go to this, and then I saw
pulled
her
one
announce
out.
I was like, yes.
So I asked Kay if she'd want to host a screening with Video Coven, and she was super stoked about it. And we're going up there on Friday, September 23rd, 2022. And it'll be myself and Melissa, my wife, who plays Ivy Sparks in the sequel. And it's gonna be a really, really good time, and I'm super stoked. I mean, Salem sincerely is like my favorite city in the world that isn't Baltimore.
Same. It's my
but
my
I mean,
home
honestly,
away from home.
I was gonna say, like, if I didn't grow up in Baltimore and I didn't love so many things about this city, I feel like it'd probably be my favorite place in the world. So I mean, we go there every year, so.
Yeah, it's great, and I can't wait to go there and meet you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll definitely be buying some stuff on you because I imagine you'll probably have some DVDs and whatnot on you. So
absolutely,
I'll be grabbing some stuff. And Dean, if there's anything you want, let me know. And that way I will.
Dude, I'll be putting in my
I'll
list.
give it to you as well, man.
You'll wish you hadn't have said that, man. I'll be putting in my lists.
Yeah, you definitely need to watch What Happens Next Will Scare You because that movie is something
this is what I was
special.
going to say. This is one of my questions. So, like over here in the UK, where can we find that? Is there any platform that we can find that?
So-
We don't really get Tubi.
It's so funny, man. Like, no, that's a shame you don't get Tubi. Damn. Call Girl was probably, if it's on Tubi, there's probably a UK platform that has Call Girl. We actually don't own Call Girl. We ended up selling the rest of that completely. We sold it in perpetuity because we're idiots. But WNUF, I mean, I think it's on Shudder for another couple weeks. They actually didn't re-up
we had that on Shudder over here. Yeah.
But it's funny, like Shudder needs to talk to us again because we haven't re-upped the contract to have that in October, or like their 5-year contract I think is up soon, so they need to talk to us about that. But I asked them if they wanted to do What Happens Next to Scare You, and I don't know if the email got lost or they just weren't interested. But that's not What Happens Next So Scary is not streaming anywhere. It's only available on DVD directly from us, and then so it's on our site wf.bigcartel.com.
Which I'll have that link in the description for everybody.
Oh,
to go
awesome!
and
Hell
watch.
yeah, I appreciate that.
Screenbox.
Yeah,
Screenbox.
Screenbox. Dude, Chris, I'm sorry, but like,
go, Dustin, I'll let you go.
I have like, we're making really good friends with Screenbox right now, and if you need emails, dude, reach out.
I've actually already been talking to those guys, believe it or not. Yeah.
Oh, that makes me so fucking happy.
Yeah.
Oh my god, hell yeah.
They're the best, man. They're so cool, aren't they? Those guys over there.
Yeah, we just had Alex and Brandon on a couple weeks ago, so yeah.
Oh, cool. Alex,
Da Vinci.
is he? That's so funny, man. Yeah. I didn't realize Alex was involved with them as well. I know John Squires is, but yeah, that's so funny, man.
Yeah, another funny thing too is Alex lives in Massachusetts as well.
I do know that. I do know that because I actually we used to play a festival up there. Oh my god, was it Killer Film Fest in was it Foxborough?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
And I met Alex for the first time up there. God, this is probably. I mean, it's almost like a decade ago. Time is weird, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
and you're definitely living a life and making all these awesome films for us to consume and consume again.
I appreciate the support, man. I mean, like, seriously, every time somebody like talks about them or asks me to be on a podcast, it helps me out immensely, and it's why we keep doing it. I mean, honestly, it's not for the dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to keep paying for them, but that's not the reason. So.
Yeah, and that's how we feel over here at the show too. It's like people think you make a podcast to try to make money. Not the case at all.
No.
Dean and I are here just talking.
It's a labor of love, man. It's a labor of love for
making
sure.
friends with people we never thought we'd be friends with, and you know, as I say to everybody, like you're part of the family now, Chris. So if there's ever anything that you need, or you need to promote something or whatever, like we're here. You know?
That sounds awesome. I'll remember that for sure.
Yeah.
You ever want a custom hot sauce made for one of your movies, man?
You do it. Do it.
We did one recently for Fried Barry. I don't know if you saw that movie, Fried Barry.
Oh man, that's so cool. I actually might. God, now I'm like thinking like, yeah, like what would be a funny? Well, if we make a WNF3, I'll just do a hot sauce, and you can just have the hot sauce license.
You can have Dean in a movie selling hot sauce. There you go.
That's so
be the hot
funny.
Sauce man.
That's so funny.
Yeah, we do. We made one for. Funny, actually, I did one for Fried Barry, the movie Fried Barry, and then I did one for the band, the Eagles of Death Metal. And I've done
that's sick.
And I've just done one for the Queens of the Stone Age, and we got like a couple of other things in the pipeline as well. But yeah, I'm kind of moving into like merch and stuff like that. And we do
really cool.
We do beer as well called Ales from the Crypt.
Oh my god, it's actually funny. We just did a beer with Scarlet Lane Brewery in Indianapolis. So Josh Hall, actually, you guys might know Josh Hall. He wrote Glorious, that movie that's on
that's
Shudder.
so good. So good.
Very Lovecraftian glory hole movie.
That's cool, yeah.
But Josh has been a friend for a long time, and we did a screening, I guess about 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
Of Out There Halloween Mega Tape, and he did a pumpkin stout that was inspired by the movie. So it's called Ivy's Be Nice Pumpkin Stout, and it's a really great stout. So.
Oh, dude, that's my next beer coming out is actually a pumpkin spice ale.
Is it? Oh my god, dude!
Yeah.
I literally just picked up. I sound like super basic right now, but like I fucking love pumpkin beers like so much. Like nothing tastes like fall to me like pumpkin beers. And I literally went to the liquor store, the big liquor store by our house recently, and I got like 13 different like single bottles to do like tasting. So we'll have some friends over and do our pumpkin beer tasting.
Awesome. Man, I love fall. Like I'm the same.
God, it's the best.
I love pumpkin anything. I mean, come on. Like I actually have my candle burning right here. It's pumpkin. So I mean, come on.
Hell yeah. Yeah, we lit ours this morning and we started our fall scents.
Yes.
And you've got your pumpkin head top on as well, Dustin. You are all pumpkin now.
Yeah, I do.
You've gone full pumpkin, man.
Oh, and my.
That's funny. I just realized I'm wearing my pumpkin shirt too, my Sleepy Hollow Film Festival shirt.
I was gonna go grab my Sam mask because my son in the other room has all the Sam masks.
Can I just jump back? So I've got a question actually. Just jumping back to WNUF. Just something I was interested in was how did the sort of process of getting that movie on Shudder, like how did that all come around?
How did it go to Shudder? So
yeah,
I mean, what was crazy to me about making the original of WNUF, right? So like it sparked to life in a way that I did not think would have ever caught on, right? So like to talk about it really quick, and a lot of people I've already talked about this in interviews plenty of times. So if you've heard this before, I'll try to tell it quickly. We didn't think anyone was going to give a shit about it, but I did know I wanted to release it on VHS for the first 2 months or 3 months, and then put the DVD out. We licensed it like literally to the no, we didn't even shop it around. We literally just said, "Hey, alternative cinema, pop cinema, you've licensed our other movies, we'll give it to you for them." And I just told them under the caveat, it has to be available for purchase by this October, because I was sick of making movies that we finished and then didn't get a release for 2 years because the distributor took forever, right? Or they needed to have certain sales sheets by certain dates. So, long story short, a couple things happened that very quickly made people give a shit about the movie. We first of all, we intentionally encourage people to torrent it. I no longer really do that with the sequel because it really is coming at a very bad financial loss to us. But we did it with the original because we wanted people to think it was real, at least to be excited about it at first.
Yeah.
So New York Times wrote about it because of this campaign and because of how unique it was. And then I was on a show, a national public radio show, a show called Here and Now, which is like a nationally syndicated show in the States. And I was on there on Halloween, and then this buzz just kept being built because it was like, because we didn't have a marketing infrastructure, like because we weren't like making a movie that's immediately playing, Fantastic Fest or TIFF or one of those bigger genre festivals, like it didn't have this big push. So when people found out about it, every time they found out about it, it was sort of like, have you seen this thing? Like this sort of whisper campaign, right? But friends would talk about it because they're like, hey, I know you like the deep cuts. No one's fucking talking about this thing, right? So it was really special like that. And I feel like ultimately that eventually got to I remember it was funny, I got an email from before he went to Blumhouse, and I'd already told him, unfortunately, we'd already licensed it for distribution. Ryan Turek had emailed us about asking what we were doing for distribution, but we'd already signed to Pop Cinema. I was like, you can talk to them. And I'm sure they didn't give a shit about licensing to Blumhouse because they would have lost money, I think. Or not Blumhouse. He wasn't even Blumhouse at the time. But anyway, but it was a shame because I was like, man, I wish I'd fucking like licensed it to Ryan back then. But then Sam Zimmerman from Shudder had contacted us because he was I'm not sure. I don't know if he's still in acquisitions now, or if he's a different capacity, but he was acquisitions then. And then he asked us to license it, and we licensed it through who was distributing it, which was Pop Cinema. But yeah.
Oh wow,
cool.
That's a long story, and I don't know how interesting that was to other people.
It's cool, man. I'm interested.
I'm
just interested in how stuff like that comes around, and
it's. I mean, honestly, man, like one of those things for me is like literally trying to talk to everybody. I'm really a big firm believer in face-to-face interactions and like talking to people at conventions and like grabbing beers or coffee or food with folks. I'm kind of terrible at the internet, and I feel like most of my close internet friendships are people that I know in real life, because I want to find genuine people and folks that aren't just like friend collectors, right?
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, I really believe in like making those connections and networking in a way that's like, but that's sincere.
Exactly.
And that's always served me well in my filmmaking career.
Awesome. Yeah, we're in that same boat right there, man. Like talking to people any way we can. I mean, COVID changed a lot of that stuff, so that's why we're in this kind of format right now.
Right. Yeah, gosh.
And also with Dean being on the other side of the pond, best way to do this. But
I vend at events, man. I'm the same. I'm like every Comic Con going in the UK, every horror con going, every festival, everything I can be at. So I'm trying to get my work visa to do the same in the States next year. So I can just meet people, talk to people, and just kind of get in.
Sorry, Dean. We're getting you there, man. Don't worry. We're getting you. Helping him as much as possible to get him over here to start doing some work, because I have a feeling his product is going to blow up over here, and especially with your first like official convention or festival being Salem Horror Fest. That's a very big thing, cool, man. So.
Yeah. Awesome.
Anyway, man.
But
Chris, man, it's been great talk. Chris, I love your energy so much, dude. You remind me of like a young Tarantino, and you got that young Tarantino energy. You know how he's got that real like vibrant energy, man. You just remind me of the young Tarantino, dude. I love it.
That's so funny. Well, I've never done coke, so yeah. I was gonna say, man, it's I don't even know if I guess I'm younger than him now, but I'm 37. I don't feel like a young man anymore.
Oh, you're younger than me.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest one here. I'm 29.
Oh shit, are you really? Yeah. Baby.
I'm a baby.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I'm a baby. This was
That's
an
awesome.
absolute blast, man.
Yeah,
it was
ditto,
awesome.
man. I had a good time talking to y'all for sure.
Yeah, I know that was kind of a little back and forth with trying to get you on here, mainly because of all the festivals and stuff that you've been doing for the sequel. And,
Yeah,
and
yeah. No, I
all that.
appreciate it, big time. And that's the only thing that's so tough. It's like I'm glad we got this to work out because I always get hit up for podcasts in the fall, but that's always the worst time for us because we're always out of town. And this year especially, we literally are out of town every single weekend, either with a screening of the sequel or our band has been playing a bunch of shows. We play in a surf punk band that writes all these songs about monsters and
That's
cryptozoology.
awesome. What's the name?
Called Beach Creeper.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah,
so you can check us
love
out at beachcreeper.bandcamp.com, and we're just
I'll
like
make sure to link that
it's
as well.
like surf punk, but yeah, I play drums. Melissa, my
Hey,
wife,
I'm a drummer
sings.
too. Hey, what's
Are
going
you really?
on?
Nice.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Dean's also a musician.
Yeah, you play guitar, right, Dean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a multi-instrumentalist, but man, I've
Nice.
been a musician for years. Yeah, I've been doing tons of stuff. We actually recorded a record with the guy from Killing Joke. Do you know the band Killing Joke?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yes. So we flew over to Spain and recorded an album with Youth from Killing Joke, man. That was, but
That's so cool.
we were doing pretty good, but yeah, it's kind of taken a bit of a backseat at the minute. But
It's tough, man.
good
Playing
play,
music
man.
I feel like playing music as you get older is especially tough because and this is probably not interesting to the horror fans listening, but like I think when I was in high school and college, or like even shortly after, getting people to go to your show, that was like the social scene.
Yeah.
And then like as you get older, and we've been very fortunate because there's a really supportive art scene in Baltimore, but like man, it's like the older people get, it's not easy to get them to come out to a bar on a weeknight.
Oh yeah, it's the same here in London as well, man. And
Yeah.
getting into London to watch shows now is really stressful because of all the we've got this ultra low emission zone thing. You have to pay congestion
Yeah.
charge. You have to pay diesels through the roof. You have to pay, and it's just people are just like, now I'll stay in.
Yeah, that's brutal. Fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, man. Back in the day, like in the I don't know, 10 years ago. Have you been to London, Chris? I don't know if you've been
I've
over.
never been. It's on my list of places I want to go. I think
Yeah.
Melissa may have been, but I'm gonna come over sometime and I'll bother you.
Yeah, man. Oh, dude, 100%. I'll be able to point you in all the right directions and show you around
Awesome.
some really cool places. But yeah, there's a place called Camden Town, and that was kind of the musical hub. That's where all the musicians would go and cut their teeth. There'd be loads of different venues. Lots and lots of big bands have come out of Camden. But it's kind of changed, man. It's all changed. It's all very gentrified now. A lot of the venues are shut down. So yeah, man, I just kind of music's taken a bit of a backseat, and which is fine because it gives me more time to sit in and watch cool fucking horror movies. So.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
man.
I'm gonna bother you guys both for music that you guys have played, like recordings. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
Seriously, I love that
yeah,
stuff.
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Anything you need, we're here for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was a blast, and being able to talk to you finally was awesome, and getting some insight on these films and how it was made, and knowing that you have the new one out, and I'm waiting to watch it for Salem Horror Fest. I'm gonna buy it from you personally, so that way you're getting it right there, and I can watch it as soon as I get home.
I hope you like it, man. It's funny. I've been there's a lot of insecurity as an artist, right? When you put something out there, and there's a lot of expectation with making a sequel to a movie that's truly beloved by a lot of folks. Like every October I get hit up by people just tell me that I watch your movie every Halloween or every October, and so far the response has been good. So far I've been very fortunate.
I have faith in you.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, I'm not gonna say any more about the movie then, but I'm curious to see what you think about it.
Oh, I'll definitely let you know. And Dean, don't worry, I'll get you a copy as well, so that way when you come over, I'll give it to you.
Man.
Yeah.
This was a blast, and
totally, guys.
It was awesome talking to you, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again some other time.
Yeah.
And another thing that we usually try to ask too is if there's ever a time you want to come back on. We do movie reviews, and they're always open to everybody, whether you're a filmmaker, an actor, or a fellow podcaster. So if you ever want to come on and talk about a specific film, we can squeeze it in our schedule and dissect it together.
That sounds cool. Yeah, no, I will keep that on my radar. It sounds fun. You guys, I had a total blast talking to y'all.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Great to meet you, man.
We're gonna sign off now. So that way everybody can go and watch all of your films wherever they can, buy them, go to festivals, support local and indie filmmaking. This is what we're all about, is supporting each other. So thank you for anybody who's listening, and Chris, for you taking some time out of your day to come and talk to us and let everybody else know what's going on in the horror world as I drop all of my stuff.
Cheers, y'all.
All right, thank you.